It looks like Masai Ujiri and Bobby Webster are trying to create some competition come this year's training camp, as Jeff Dowtin Jr. has been re-signed by the organization, as many Raptors fans expected. However, his contract is non-guaranteed, and the details of it are fairly interesting. So we'll break that down in this video, what it means for the Raptors roster flexibility going forward for the rest of the offseason, and a whole bunch more in this vid. So without further ado, let's jump straight into it, as Shams came out of The Athletic breaking down a little signing for the Toronto Raptors. His free agent guard Jeff Dowtin Jr. has agreed to a training camp deal to re-sign with the Toronto Raptors, with a significant salary guarantee if he makes the opening night roster. So this is really interesting, as basically, come last season's post-season presser, whatever you want to call it, Masai Ujiri came out and said, despite the fact Jeff Dowtin Jr., who was a two-way guy for the Toronto Raptors last season, didn't get his contract converted to a full-time spot, to a full-time role with the team, he was a part of the Toronto Raptors' future. That's what Masai said, so the fact that he said that directly, and the fact he's been in the Toronto Raptors practice facility all summer, getting workouts in, we've seen photos of him putting in the grind over the summer to improve his game, fact all that. Many Raptors fans assumed that he would be on the roster coming into this year. And basically, we weren't sure if it was going to be a two-way contract, a full-out contract, guaranteed, or whatever the heck it is. But over the past week, we did realize that it wasn't going to be a two-way deal, as we had Marquise Noel signed pretty well immediately after the draft on a two-way. Ron Harper Jr. took up that second two-way spot for the second year in a row, as he was a two-way along with Jeff Dowtin for the team last season. And then Javon Liberty Freeman took up that final spot yesterday, or a couple of days ago now at this point. So Jeff Dowtin Jr. wasn't getting a two-way spot, so he's going to battle for a full-time roster position on this Raptors team. And it's interesting that they didn't give it to him, as, they haven't signed anyone else to training camp deals to fight for that sort of spot, fight for that position. But you look at Jeff Dowtin Jr.'s stats for last year, and they're nothing too crazy. Obviously, the eye test has hyped up some Toronto Raptors fans, but he's a 6'3" guard, 26 years old, so not young in any sense of the word, but at least in Toronto, in basketball terms, right? He's just sort of entering the prime of his career at this point, but 2.4 points per game, 1 rebound, 1 assist per night, 43% from the field, 31% from the three-point line. And the thing about Jeff Dowtin Jr.'s stats, they're a bit skewed given the fact that he didn't get a lot of minutes, didn't get a lot of opportunities last season. He was a two-way guy, coming in a lot of garbage time minutes over last year. So I filtered his stats so we get a little bit of a better look at who Jeff Dowtin Jr., the player, is for just minutes or just games last season where he played over 10 minutes a night. Basically, you can see this per game splits, or the specific splits that are going down there, but an average 16 minutes per game, 4.4 points, 1.7 rebounds, 2.3 assists, and shooting 45% from the field. In more extensive run, the three-point percentage increases rather than just coming into the game at the last moments, getting hook-up shots. So that three-point percentage definitely jumps up to 36%, which is more respectable, and why I think a lot of Raptors fans think he's a better shooter than the 30% that's sort of indicating his total stats. But other than that, the free throw percentage is still not great. He's a guy that can come out there, command the offense, be a legitimate point guard in every sense of the word. He hustles on defense, he brings the energy, and whether he's getting assists or not, he just is out there talking on the court. His teammates, despite the fact he's a two-way player, or was a two-way player last season, respected him as sort of the floor general out there. Got the ball moving, got the ball swinging. I always sort of resembled it to the Lonzo Ball-esque assists. He pushed the ball early, get the ball out of his hand. So you're getting some hockey assists there with Jeff Dowtin Jr. Was just a guy that I'm a big fan of. I love point guards that set up the offense, put people in the right places, and make solid decisions. Now, is he setting the world on fire with insane jump shooting? No. His floater game is one of the more unorthodox shots I've seen in the NBA, but definitely it's been effective for him on those, opportunities with the Toronto Raptors. Plays solid defense, and is a guy that I think could have serious potential as a backup point guard for this team come next season. So makes sense that he's getting one of these roster spots if he is brought back with the team. I don't know if it would make sense, given the fact he's not super young, to have him on another season as a two-way guy, but the interesting part of the sort of contract we handed him, we'll talk about the roster flexibility as this vid goes along, but the significant salary guarantee. And, if he gets signed to the team open night, and significant salary guarantee, that wording, that specific phrasing from Shams The Athletic basically makes me feel like we're not giving him a minimum contract if he ends up re-signing with the squad. Is it multi-year? I doubt it, but we could be giving Jeff Dowtin Jr. some serious bread. I don't think it would be anything that would put us over the tax, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's 4 or 5 million, given the fact we've been teasing Jeff Dowtin Jr. with a roster spot for over a year. So in order for him to stay within the organization, not to try to go to an opportunity where he's guaranteed a roster spot at the deep end of the bench, maybe he wasn't given one of those opportunities. I don't know. It's tough to tell, but the fact that we've been teasing him for this amount of time, not converting his two-way contract when we really should have at the end of last year, we're making a push for the playoffs, not giving him a fully guaranteed deal this summer, despite the fact he's been training in our gym, training in the Toronto Raptors practice facility all summer, makes me feel like the Raptors sort of have incentives in there, incentivized him with the unguaranteed deal, so they have that flexibility whether or not to bring in a guy like Edmund Sumner, who's been reportedly the Raptors have had exploratory interest in. A couple weeks ago, Ayo Dosunmu, who imagined that the Raptors would have brought in if he was more available. He signed a pretty significant deal with the Chicago Bulls, right? The Raptors maintain their flexibility, but Jeff Dowtin Jr., if he does stay with the team, he's betting on himself a little bit, will get a significant payout. So I think that's the sort of construction of the deal, and that's what Shams is basically saying. But there's one roster spot left for the team. There's about 2 training camp deals that we can still offer, so the Raptors can have a good look. I mean, we've had interesting players in the past that have gotten cut and given these training camp deals, looking at guys like Sam Decker, Ishmael Wainwright, players that, considering the fact Isaac Bonga made the roster over them, probably could have solidified themselves in the Raptors. But I don't know, Ishmael Wainwright has had a decent career with the Phoenix Suns, but Jeff Dowtin Jr., I'd predict he would end up making the roster. Sumner, maybe a player that if he does get brought in, if he chooses the Raptors over the other teams that have had interest in him, then maybe there's more of a battle, there's more of a competition. But regardless, Jeff Dowtin Jr. is going to be coming into this year's training camp fighting for a spot, because I'd imagine it wouldn't make sense for the Raptors not to fill out their training camp roster, and it's going to be some battles. He's going to be out here fighting for that final roster position. Masai Ujiri has taken some weird risks, taken some, not consensus picks with the deep roster spots, but Jeff Dowtin Jr. is a player that I think, from what we saw last season, deserves a spot in the NBA, whether we'll see who his competition is up against. So the Raptors are likely going to be bringing in 2 more players in the coming weeks to fill out for training camp and preseason, but I don't know. I'd like to see Jeff Dowtin Jr. back. Again, the stats aren't super, super flashy. 4.4 points per game in games where he had over 10 minutes is nothing too wild, but he has had some good moments, and the game just seemed to flow a different way. Fred VanVleet's a much better player than Jeff Dowtin Jr., don't get me wrong, but brought a different sort of aura of basketball to the team when he was thrown into the game, which I think was conducive to winning, especially in stretches for the Raptors last year. So I think he's an NBA guard. I think he we'll find a roster spot regardless where it is, but we'll find out, given how training camp plays out, what trades could potentially go down, if it's going to be with the Toronto Raptors. So let me know what you guys think about Jeff Dowtin Jr. potentially being brought back to the team. It's going to be an interesting sort of training camp. The Raptors are still sort of in flux. Feels like we still haven't chosen a direction, given the fact that we still have Pac and OG unsigned, right? I want those guys extended, but I don't know. It doesn't seem like it's going to happen, but we'll see what ends up happening. But you guys are best to make a start. Subscribe to the channel if you guys haven't already. Anyways, I'm signing out. Cheers.